Good evening, everybody. My name is Charles Kilmer with the Old Colony Planning Council. I'm their Deputy Director and Transportation Program Manager. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Safe Streets for All Regional Vision Zero Action Plan public meeting. And I'd like to thank the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the U.S. DOT for providing the funding for this important planning activity, which will result in a safer environment for all users. Before we introduce our panelists, I note that we have staff members from the Old Colony Planning Council and the Beta Group Consulting Group and Capital Strategic Solutions Consultant as well. Um, Before we get into our presentation, I'd like to note that we have a chat function and we've posted some important information in the chat. And as we're all interested in transportation, I'd like to point out another transportation opportunity, which is occurring tomorrow at 12 p.m. and is being brought to you by our colleagues at Transportation for Massachusetts. And it's part of their People's Caravan series, and it's called Uncovering the Cost of the Current Funding Structure and How Funding Flows in and Out of the Transportation System. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Bill McNulty. He's our senior transportationer with Old Colony Planning Council. Bill?
Well, thank you, Charlie. And I'd like to reflect Charlie's comments on welcoming everybody tonight. Just to provide a little background on this plan and study and why we're doing this and how it came about before I hand it over to Beta Group for their presentation. So a couple of years ago, under a guidance from the United States Department of Transportation, we began to incorporate what's called the safe systems approach into our safety management system. So the Old Colony MPO every year, we have um, a safety management system where it's, you know, in in very basic terms, we look at overall safety on the transportation network, and we're with the ultimate goal of preventing serious injuries and fatalities. So the safe systems approach that came about a couple of years ago was based on models that had been successfully implemented in Europe and Australia, and we're trying to emulate now in the United States. Basically, it says that there's a shared responsibility for preventing serious injuries and fatalities on the infrastructure. So obviously, safe drivers have a responsibility to operate safely and responsibly, but then vehicle manufacturers, it's on them to produce safe vehicles, and you see it every year. More and more advanced safe systems and equipment in vehicles. It's on the system stewards, which brings in us, the Old Colony MPO. So the system stewards are the state DOTs, the NPOs who are responsible for coming up with unified planning work programs and a transportation improvement program, and then by the municipalities to provide safe roadways, and also safe operating speeds on the roadway network, the safe speed limits, and finally, it's post crash care, where our emergency medical services and medical facilities, making sure that when a crash does occur and an injury is sustained, that that injury isn't becoming a more serious injury, that everyone's getting the care that they need as quickly and as efficiently as they can. So using the the shared responsibility model, how we come in, like I said, we basically, we have um, as an NPO, we can affect basically in three of those areas. The safe speed limits, we can work with our municipalities to establish safe speed limits. We can uh, obviously, through safety management, identify high risk and high injury networks on on the network, and that's what this plan's all about. And also, we can look at um behavior of travelers and how we can make that safer. So So with that, like Charlie said, we applied for the grant to the bipartisan infrastructure law. We received it. And what this plan ultimately does, allows the 17 communities of the Old Colony region to then go forward and apply for improvement, apply for grants for improvements in their communities, also through the Safe Streets for All program. So there's different levels of funding. So there are demonstration grants. So those when you think of a demonstration grant, you think of something that can be implemented fairly quickly to improve safety. So for example, in Brockton, they had a demonstration grant that used flex posts at one of their high risk areas to kind of improve pedestrian safety. So that would be an example of something to that. And then there's implementation grants, which would be your larger capital um, improvements, whether you're looking to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety on an entire corridor, reconstruct an intersection. So this plan will identify um, high risk areas in the communities and making those then making allowing those communities to then be eligible to go forward and apply for additional grants to um, seek funding for improvements. So that's how we got here. Thanks everyone again for coming. I believe my email is in the chat, and with that, I'll hand it over to Jacqueline Centracchio and allow her to introduce herself and her team.
Thanks, Bill. You've touched upon some of my slides, so that's good. We'll keep things moving along. All right. Well, thank you everybody again for joining us here so you can listen to more about the SS4A action plan for OCPC. And thanks again to Bill and Charlie for your opening comments. My name is Jacqueline Centracchio from Beta Group, and we have the good fortune of working with OCPC on this project. Listed on this slide are also a list of presenters. Myself, Anna, Austin, and Emily will be presenting. Other team members from Beta and Capital Strategic Solutions are also in attendance to support the presentation and participate in the open discussion, which will occur after the presentation. Taking a look at our agenda, first we'll talk a bit about the SS4A program and what a safety action plan is, and then we'll outline our public engagement for the project and go over the safety analysis review. Next, we'll discuss some countermeasure options and outline our next steps in the process. We'll close with an open discussion, and that's when we'd really like to hear from the participants tonight. This will also be an interactive presentation throughout, so we'll be seeking information from you all. There's 5 survey questions scattered throughout the presentation, and there's 2 ways for you to provide responses. Option 1 is to scan the QR code when it comes up on the screen, and option 2 is using a web browser. So you'll just open up your web browser on your phone, tablet, or your computer. You'll go to polev.com/OCPC679. This link will be dropped, which was just dropped in the Zoom chat. So you can also just click on that, and then you'll see the live poll or activity appear on your screen. Whether you scan the QR code or you go to your web browser, the survey should just pop up. As I said, there's 5 questions, so please do not skip ahead to the next question. We'll work through each question together, and as you respond, the responses will appear in real time on the presentation screen. So to start things off, we'd like to poll the audience with our first survey question. So if everyone could either scan the QR code on the next slide or click the link in the Zoom chat and let us know which municipality you represent. It can be more than one answer. You could work in one, you can work in Avon but live in Brockton. You can put both of those in the chat. Not the chat here, but the chat in the poll, the question. And then the responses will appear in real time. So we'll wait a minute or so to give everybody enough time to respond. It does say to please text this number on the screen, but to avoid any other confusion, we're just going to do the QR code, or you can click on the link in the chat. Let's see, the link is in the chat. So if you go, I can't see the bottom of my screen right now. She's looking for the chat. Oh, it's a copy and paste.
Yep, I
Can you
just
try to,
resent it.
okay. Can we put a live link to just click? Is that possible?
I don't believe so.
Just click it? No. So you can copy that and paste it in your browser, or you can, there we go. You can just click on it now in the chat. We'll just look ahead to see if there are people clicking. Austin, can we just go one slide ahead and see? Oh, look at this. This is great. We have great representation. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. If you put that you're a resident or an organizer, if you're able to put where you're a resident of. So we have Stoughton, Duxbury, Brockton, Plymouth, Kingston. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A lot of Brockton representation. So on this slide, the bigger the text is, the more participants we have from that municipality, which is great. So we have about 7 communities represented here tonight. Great. Since this is the first question, we'll just give a little more time on it. People to be able to enter, because there's a little bit of a learning curve with this. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jed. So Brockton resident and organizer of Brockton Bikes. Thank you.
We have 19
Right.
attendees and 16 surveys. Is that right?
And we're representing 7 communities. Okay. All right, great. Seems to have slowed down, so that helps give us an understanding of who is present on the call today. So thank you. We've made it through 1 of the 5, so congratulations on that. All right, so just a little bit more about Safe Streets for All. Bill did touch upon a lot of it. It is a grant program established by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. There are 2 types of grants. One is a planning and demonstration grant to fund the development or complete or supplement an action plan. So the goal of the action plan is to develop a holistic, well-defined strategy to prevent roadway fatalities and serious injuries in a region or town, municipality. Then there's an implementation grant, which provides federal funds to implement the projects and develop strategies outlined in the safety action plan. So as Bill had mentioned, we're putting together the safety action plan for OCPC, and that can be used by communities to seek implementation grant funding. The overarching goal is to improve roadway safety, significantly reducing and eventually eliminating roadway fatalities and serious injuries. We cannot stress that enough, especially for vulnerable users. The key takeaway from this slide is that it shows that there's a national trend of a consistent increase in pedestrian and total fatal crashes over the years. This graphic is taken from the OCPC Long Range Transportation Plan, which generally shows that OCPC region has been seeing a downward trend in serious injury and fatal crashes. But it's important to recognize that although regionally there is a downward trend, nationally there's a consistent increase, and any death or serious injury related crash is too many. So the federal government recognizes this, and it was a factor in the development of the SS4A program. A safety action plan, again, is a local or regional plan that combines data analysis and public outreach to target highest safety risk locations, consider equity, and the safe system approach that Bill was talking about. This slide just shows the components of a safety action plan, and you can see the MassDOT primer on their website, or Federal Highway also has this outlined on their website. And at this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Emily to talk about public engagement.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So as Jacqueline mentioned, public engagement is a big part of this process, and we hit the ground running this summer on that front. We met with the 17 communities to collect feedback about areas of concern and also where improvements are needed. Next slide. We also rolled out an interactive map, what we refer to as the dashboard, in early October. And the dashboard is asking similar questions about the types and locations of safety concern. And it allows users to leave comments about any location in the study area directly on this map. I'm curious if folks could raise their hands, any attendees, if you have participated in any of those municipal meetings that we've done, or if you submitted information through the dashboard. If you could go down to the bottom of your screen and click on the React button and raise your hand, it would be lovely to see a show of hands of who, if any, have already participated in this way. I see 1, 2, 3. This is great. So at least 4 folks have already participated, have either navigated through the dashboard or attended one of the stakeholder meetings. And we hope that those of you who haven't visited the dashboard yet will do so later on after this meeting. We'll drop a link right in the chat so everyone can access it. So next slide, the feedback we've collected so far. We have heard from 95 people through that interactive dashboard map. The feedback we've gotten has represented 10 of the 17 communities. We've also coordinated with the JTC, local, state, and federal transportation partners to collect feedback in our data gathering phase. And what we've heard through the 100 or so people we've spoken to live at the interviews, and then the comments that we've received through the dashboard, has given our team a great deal of information about the region and about the safety concerns. So what exactly have we heard? You may be wondering. Next slide. From a roadway and motorized vehicle perspective, some issues we're hearing a lot about are visibility and sight distance problems, outdated or missing signals, confusing intersection layouts, unsafe left turn scenarios, and then behaviorally, we've heard about road rage and speeding and red light running also as concerns. Then relative to supporting infrastructure, unsafe or missing crosswalks have been identified several times, sidewalk gaps, accessibility concerns for people with disabilities, overall lack of bike infrastructure, and poor pavement condition. So now we're going to go into another poll question. We want to ask you what your concerns are. So this is going to be a multiple choice. You can select all that apply. And if you think we've missed any on this list, we would invite you to add your other concerns, what we have missed here, into the Zoom chat, since there isn't a space to type in a separate answer into the poll itself. So take a minute and look through these, select all that you think are the greatest concerns for you or your community. And again, if you are either unable to answer the poll or you have thoughts that aren't included on this list, please drop those into the Zoom chat. And as Jacqueline said, if you're having trouble with the poll, just drop your answers in the Zoom chat. We really want to make sure we're hearing your opinions through this forum. Your input matters. That's why we're here tonight. So however you get your thoughts to us, they will be considered. Great. So speeding. lack of bike ped infrastructure. Yeah, this looks pretty well aligned with what we've seen so far. Conflicts of vehicles and bike pads. And I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So that seems like we're getting good participation through the poll. One attendee noted the concern with the discredited 85th percentile, which MassDOT continues to refer to. We'll have to follow up on that. Conflicts with bike and ped, speeding and lack of sidewalks, speeding. Great. Okay, I think we've received all of our answers here. I'm going to turn it over to Anna to continue with the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Emily. My name is Anna Singer. I'm going to tell you all about how we developed the High Injury Network, which is a key part of the Safety Action Plan. It's aimed at identifying locations across OCPC communities that are most in need of safety improvements. Next slide. So to identify the key locations, we asked a couple questions. First, we wanted to understand where crashes have historically been occurring across the region. We called this part of the analysis the trends-based historical analysis. This was focused around collection and understanding of roadway crashes that have happened in recent years, in particular serious and fatal injury crashes. Second, we wanted to understand where in the region is at risk of future crashes, despite not having had as many crashes recently. So we called this portion of the analysis the risk-based predictive analysis. I'm going to talk a bit more about the methods for both of those analyses next, but both of these analyses were used to prioritize top intersections and corridors in the region to create a high injury network. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the trends-based high injury network focused on identifying locations that have experienced roadway crashes in recent years, in particular crashes that resulted in a serious or fatal injury. So we identified locations by linking roadway crashes from 2018 to 2022 to intersections and segments across the region. And then we gave every intersection and segment a score based on the number and severity of crashes that occurred. So as part of the score, we also incorporated whether the location was in an environmental justice community. Environmental justice communities are communities with a higher percentage of people of color, low-income residents, or residents with limited English proficiency. So as you can see here, we used a variety of data to do the analysis, including roadways, intersections, and crashes from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, as well as environmental justice communities from Massachusetts, MassGIS, which is the GIS system. Next slide. So this map shows the trends-based high injury network. The red show the locations with the highest severity scores. So you can see many of these are in Brockton, but there are locations across the region as well. Next slide. So second part of the high injury network, as I mentioned, is the risk-based analysis, which was used to identify locations that are currently lower crash, but that share characteristics with higher crash locations. So some of the risk factors we looked at to identify these locations were traffic volumes, speed limits, surface width, and intersection characteristics, such as whether a location is stop controlled or signalized, as well as the number of approaches. So we'll talk a bit later about what the top locations were that we identified, but the final high injury network was a combination of the risk-based and the trends-based high injury network. Next slide. So next I'm going to talk a bit about the overall safety trends that we identified as part of our safety analysis. Next slide. So as an overview, between the years 2018 and 2022, around 39,000 crashes occurred on roadways in the OCPC communities. Of these crashes, around 30% resulted in an injury to a person involved in the crash. And the numbers we really want to emphasize through this plan are those on the bottom here. So during the key study years, 119 crashes resulted in a death to someone involved in the crash, and 875 crashes resulted in a life-altering injury. So these crashes are the crashes that hurt our communities the most, and are really the emphasis for the safety action plan. We also recognize that these crashes have continued to occur over the past years since 2022. So we're continuing to monitor the crashes as we develop the plan. We recognize every crash that happens is a tragedy that we really want to eliminate. For example, we know last week a woman was killed while crossing the street on North Main Street in Brockton on Tuesday morning. So we want to make sure that these crashes are included as we finalize the plan to prevent crashes from happening at these locations in the future. Next slide. So we wanted to understand what types of crashes are more likely to result in a fatal or serious injury. To understand where to focus our energy as part of the safety action plan. So here on the slide, you can see some of the types of crashes that are most likely to result in a serious or fatal injury. Single vehicle crash is a crash that typically involves somebody departing the lane and crashing into an object on the side of the road. For example, trees and poles are overrepresented in serious and fatal crashes. Angle crashes are also overrepresented when it comes to serious and fatal injuries. Angle crashes occur when two vehicles traveling in different directions collide, typically at an intersection. Serious crashes involving people walking and biking are also more likely to be serious and fatal based on the lack of protection of people who are walking and biking, and head-on crashes as well. We also found that crashes in lower light conditions, so in the night or at dusk or dawn, are also were also overrepresented when it came to serious or fatal injuries. So these are really the types of crashes we want to really focus on and emphasize as part of the safety action plan. Next slide. This chart here shows crashes by town, by severity within the OCPC region. So as you can see here, Brockton had the most crashes in the study years between 2018 and 2022 with almost 12,000 crashes, followed by Plymouth and Stoughton. I just want to emphasize here that, we know there are crashes across all of our communities, and we're really looking into every community. We also want to note that Brockton did have the highest percentage of crashes that resulted in an injury, with 40% of their crashes resulting in injury compared to 30% region-wide. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Austin to talk next. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Anna. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the environmental justice communities we were talking about earlier. So this is just showing where the environmental justice communities are in the Old Colony region. So you can see that there's a lot in Brockton, or basically all of Brockton, Avon, Stoughton, and then also scattered regionally. And another key point was that 45% of crashes that we looked at during this period occurred within an environmental justice community. So we want to focus on addressing this concern. Another point that we found is that we really want to reduce the number of crashes with vulnerable road users, since they are more likely to be involved in serious or fatal crashes. And we also looked at crashes near transit stops. We found that although 38% of total crashes occurred within a quarter mile of a transit stop, 61% of crashes with a non-motorist, such as a pedestrian or bicyclist, occurred within a quarter mile. So really want to look into safety improvements near transit stops and stations throughout the region. A couple other key points. Drivers ages 15 to 24 make up 14% of the Old Colony population, but are involved in 34.5% of all crashes, while drivers ages 65 and up make 26% of the population, but they're involved in 18.4% of the population. So this just goes to kind of make the point that we want to look into educational programs as well as part of our safety action plan, and also look into things like distracted driving, which have been a huge concern among younger populations. Another final point is that 60% of crashes throughout the study have occurred at an intersection. So making sure that our safety improvements are targeted to intersection improvements. So here's our initial findings. So these are the two lists of top intersections. On the left, you can see the top locations overall, which are primarily in Brockton, which has the main one at Main Street and Franklin Street. That's the #1 ranked in the region. On the right, there is also a table showing the top locations for intersections without including Brockton, which has quite a fair share of communities: Easton, Hanover, Avon, Stoughton. one of the key points here is that a lot of these projects are either under tip or maybe under tip projects as part of the MassDOT. But we still want to include them as part of this project in order to make sure if they don't receive funding through the tip, that we also provide a way for them to receive grants through the Safe Streets for All program. So just making sure that these locations are attended to, whether it be through the tip or Safe Streets for All funding in our next in the next phase of the project. And here are the two top lists of our top segment locations. So on the left, you can see also primarily Brockton segments, but the number one segment in the region was actually Purchase Street in Easton. On the right, you can see a top list of segments without Brockton. So again, you see Easton, Stoughton, Avon, Bridgewater rise to the top there. I'll just give a couple more seconds to maybe take in, but if you don't have a full chance to look through all of these tables, we'll also provide a link to the crash dashboard. So this will actually provide a list of the top locations throughout the entire region. So you can see regionally what the top locations are for both intersections and segments. And then also you can filter by town. So you can see what the top intersections and segments are in your town. And this also provides a couple other interesting facts, like it tells a lot about the crashes, how many crashes are in your town, the crash severity, the manner of collision, and crashes per year. This will be a good tool to sort of show the trends in the future years on how crashes are declining in your town or city. So that sort of leads me into the next survey question. So if you could choose any one intersection or corridor in your community to improve, what would it be? Just make sure you include the city or town name, and maybe we can start a bit. If there's any other comments in the chat, feel free to put that in as well. See some have already been included. Main Street Brockton, definitely a high on the table as well. Kingston. Standish Ave at Cherry Street, that was definitely one of the top concerns. State Road, Herring Pond Road, remember that one as well. Yeah, and if it's not like anything specific too, feel free to put that in as well. If you see maybe there's a group of intersections in your city or town that have been top concern. Landing Road, remember that one. Yeah, and again, if you can't get the poll to work, feel free to drop anything else in the Zoom chat, and we'll also look over that as well.
Yeah, I say Lincoln Street and Central Street, Page Street and Stoughton in the chat.
Yep. Cool. All right, maybe I'll give it a couple more seconds. Can always go back and add any other locations to this or to the dashboard when we link it at the end. So that sort of leads us into our next question, which is why did you choose this intersection or corridor? So this can be maybe a specific concern or maybe some of the things we talked about earlier, if there's speeding, red light running, those sorts of things. Sometimes, I mean, we've heard from meetings, just sometimes intersections are just confusing the drivers. There's a lot of near misses because of that, those sorts of things. I'll give some time to sort of let everyone add in their responses. Speeding, poor lighting. Poor lighting's definitely been something we've looked at throughout this entire project.
Yeah, speeding on the chat.
Yep. road rage. That was something we also got through our dashboard as well. Seems to be a common theme. Vehicle congestion. Speeding.
Also, I was just gonna point out that lots of times it's not just one thing, right? So it's
Right.
often a combination of these factors.
And maybe I'll give it a little bit more time.
And even when we switch slides, people can still add more information to this question. So if we switch and you're still typing something in, don't worry, we'll still see your response.
Yes. With that, I will jump into the next question. I, yeah, so we've sort of gone over a lot of the analysis and identifying the top locations. So one of the next steps of the project is identifying safety countermeasures. This includes projects, but also includes policies and education as well. So one of the more general things I wanted to bring up is proven safety countermeasures, which are from the Federal Highway Administration, but this basically provides a toolbox for addressing specific safety concerns in communities and providing countermeasures for those specific concerns. For example, you can see at the top speeding, which has been a huge concern. Some of the many countermeasures, for example, are implementing road diets for large roadways, adding speed feedback signs you can see in the top right. Those have been quite effective in a lot of communities. The bottom left, conflicting turning movements. One of the countermeasures we've seen is access management. So just managing driveways. This could be closing driveways as well to make sure vehicles aren't pulling out in weird locations. For pedestrian visibility, one of the things we've seen is curb extensions, which help shorten pedestrian crossing distance and also make them visible to drivers as well. Adding bike lanes for bike separation. And then another concern is head-on crashes. So adding things like median barriers. And another thing we've seen is centerline rumble strips as well in many communities. So with all those in mind, that sort of leads me to the next question is what types of improvements would you like to see at the location, either you just described earlier or maybe another location in your town, a general overview of things in your town you'd like to see. Feel free to add that to the poll. I see a lot of different ones. Better traffic signals. Sidewalks have been a major one. Reducing speed with enforcement cameras or something like that. Yep. Do speed radar signs have been a huge bonus for that. Reduce width of road. Yep. Just like we've seen with the road diets, that's been a major help for some communities. Narrow travel lanes, same thing. Better turn to protect pedestrian crossings. Yes. Those bump outs can also be used at intersections as well to sort of make vehicles have better visibility of pedestrians as they're crossing intersections. See in the chat, sidewalks, traffic lights, reduce heavy truck traffic, all good ones. Clear directionals painted on roads. It's a good one. Roundabouts. Knew that would always come up. All right, I will let everyone continue adding in questions, but I will go to the next slide. And I'm just going to turn it back over to Jacqueline to sort of wrap up the presentation.
Great, thanks, Austin. On this slide, you'll see 3 links. We love the links during this presentation. So the 3 links will be put into the chat. So if after you leave this meeting, you have other concerns or safety issues come up while you're driving, walking, biking, there's still time to relay that information to us. So feel free to text Bill McNulty with your concerns. You can enter the information onto the dashboard, which is the second link. And the third link is the OCPC SS4A website page for project page for updates on the project. You can also find the dashboard on that page too. And I think they're posted to the link. Great. All right. So moving forward, we're going to take all the information gathered to date and develop recommendations. We're also going to conduct an equity analysis, which will include a transportation equity review to better understand how existing transportation systems, services, and decision-making processes impact the lives of all users, including underserved and underrepresented communities. All components of the process will be compiled and put into the safety action plan. The plan will be reviewed and submitted in June of 2025. The plan will also be used, as we've said a few times, for municipalities to seek funding for the implementation plan grants, which we outlined on the earlier slides. And really at this time, that closes out our official presentation, and we'd like to open up the floor to any comments or questions from the audience. So you can either use the raised hand tool or just add any comments or questions in the chat. And Emily and I will keep an eye on
I
that.
see one raised hand already. We can invite Christina to share a comment.
Great.
I'm gonna allow her to talk.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. So I am zooming in, if you will, from Stoughton, and specifically the Route 139 corridor in North Stoughton, Turnpike Street. My concerns there are the increased vehicles that are traveling on that road. We've seen a lot of uptick in tractor trailer activity. And also people now traveling, whether they're coming mainly from the Randolph area or off the highways, they are racing into that residential zone that is located as you pass the Dunkin' Donuts, which is contributing to vehicles jockeying for position. And when you couple that with road rage, it turns into a very dangerous scene. In fact, this past August, we did have a fatality that happened in my neighborhood. 2 vehicles were involved, and one of the drivers lost his life, unfortunately, because of the jockeying of position, coming in at an increased speed, and then trying to get in front of one another in order to funnel into a residential zone. So that's become a very big concern of mine and the residents in that area. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things, but I know I touched upon a lot of them in the survey that you provided, which was great. Thank you. And I know if there's some other things that I'll contribute to the information, you know, the dashboard and the contact information you provided. Also, I've been diligently working with our town engineers, you know, to come up with a solution for that area as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christina. I see Julie's hand raised. I'm gonna first go to the webinar chat and ask a question, and then I'll unmute Julie. So Jed has said, it's my understanding that Brockton missed out on US DOT funding because it has not formally adopted a Vision Zero resolution, has not formally have made a committee to advance recommendations of the safety action plan. If Brockton fails to do so, are we at risk of not getting any SS4A funding? Jeff or Jacqueline, do you want to take this?
I don't know. Do you want to take it, or maybe Charlie has some information on that for Brockton?
Sure. Thank you, Jed, for the question. So about a year ago, MassDOT hired Kittleson and Associates, and they developed a Vision Zero plan for the city of Brockton. And we understand that Brockton had applied and received money for a demonstration grant in an earlier round, but most recently they applied for another series of improvements, and that was not approved by USDOT. And one of the things that Pat Hill, the DPW commissioner, is going to work on with the city is to have the city council actually adopt a resolution to approve the Brockton Vision Zero plan, and then also work with the mayor to get the mayor's approval of the plan. So in their next time that they apply for the Vision Zero implementation grants, that will certainly be something helpful for their application. And along those lines, we're going to fold in the work of that Brockton plan along with the work of the beta group and the group of the public into the Old Colony SS4A regional action plan. So that will also position communities to apply for the Safe Streets for All implementation grants. So I know Brockton staff is underway on working on the adoption of that plan at the local level, and this plan itself will actually help with the implementation grants going forward.
Thank you, Charlie. I was offering to unmute someone earlier, and I don't see that hand raised anymore. So I'm going to go back to the chat for another question. This is from Pine Dubois. How can we become aware of grant opportunities in a timely way?
Is this a general question in terms of any grant or SS4A grants?
Fine, I can allow you to talk if you'd like to.
Oh, sorry, that's right. You can type it in if.
While she's typing that, so I can kind of briefly touch upon that. So every month we have the Joint Transportation Committee meeting. It's open to the public. It was mentioned earlier that, I think we have like 300 invitees on our newsletter list that goes out to every month. And we at every meeting we have in our communications report we do mention grant opportunities. So we have staff that are continuously monitoring notices of funding opportunities. We actually have a staff member that's his only job. He's a grants expert in our office. Paul, he's a great guy. If he's a good guy to know. So we're continuously monitoring that stuff, and we constantly update the communities as we find out about it.
And both Charlie and I dropped different links, but really the same main link for the SS4A grants. And also, so you can just click on that and find a lot of information on those grants and when the next ones are coming out, which will be about March 2025.
Jacqueline, can I just add?
Of course.
On the action plan we're doing now, once the action plan is completed and adopted, it allows the communities and the OCPC region to apply for implementation and demonstration grants. So this is the first step towards receiving additional funding for actual infrastructure implementation for safety measures.
I'm not seeing any more hands, but there was Christina had a comment regarding the North Stoughton Turnpike Street Route 139. Question is, where's the border of the town line and the state line? I'm not sure if we're going to be able to answer that unless someone from OCPC has that information.
I don't have it readily available, but yeah, we can find it out. So yeah, I think it's just determining where the town jurisdiction ends and where the state picks up. Yeah, so we can easily identify that. So if you want to email me, I can let you know. I will say that, so speaking of Route 139, Old Colony Planning Council did just complete a corridor study for Route 139 Stoughton. That report was finalized very recently, and just because the report's finalized, we continue to work with the town. Yeah, Stoughton is fortunate that they have some great folks in town hall. Between Mark and Craig and Bill, that they're all really engaged, and so we're looking forward to continuing to work with Stoughton and any improvements, especially safety improvements coming out of that Route 139 corridor study.
Great. And last, it looked like we had Charlie's hand was raised, but it's down now.
Oh, thank you. I just dropped in the chat the link to the Massachusetts Federal Funds Infrastructure Office. And that's a grant office established by the Healy administration to position Massachusetts to go after all of these discretionary grants. And it's not just transportation, it's grants through the EPA and different funding opportunities. And they typically have a monthly meeting, and it's a great resource. And on their page, they also have a list of upcoming grant opportunities.
The good part about a virtual meeting is I could just look up the jurisdiction on 138. So it's from Wyman Street up to, oh wait, no, that's not it. I'm on Washington Street. Was that 138? No, maybe I'm messing this up. Forget I said that. We'll get back to you.
Another comment from Mary, who is agreeing with Christina. She lives on Page Street, which intersects with Turnpike Street. Driving on that road has become a speedway and very dangerous. So sort of upvoting that previous comment. And I did want to acknowledge the person who recognized or who noted having a hard time with navigating the Zoom. We apologize for any issues. We certainly hope that you were able to share your feedback in the Zoom chat here. And if you have any questions and you're still on, Sarah, and you'd like to share with the group, we'd be happy to give you the floor. Okay, comments are slowing down. We have recorded all of this, as Jacqueline mentioned in the beginning. Jacqueline, do you have any final words?
No, I'm just still looking on the map for the streets. Just it looks like it's all local jurisdiction. But that's we really appreciate everybody's input. This has been really fruitful, and we'll take a look at all the information more closely as we move forward. And again, just dashboard comments, you can email Bill. We'd love to still hear from you. And we really, truly appreciate your time. And we look forward to the final product in June and getting more funding for you all. Thank you.
Hey,
Have
thanks,
a good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Yeah.